Hello everyone, welcome back. So I was inspired by Eco Baronen's Metagame Monday on Legacy. It's a series that he's been doing for quite a while now, where he analyzes the challenges of the last week, takes a look at where the meta is going directionally, and kind of makes a little bit of a talk about what is going on, things to attack the meta, stuff like that. So I'll leave a link in the description down below. So I was inspired by that to make something similar for Vintage. Reasoning for it is we're just done with Season 1, where I was playing the qualifier and had to do a lot of work on the metagame that I don't usually do. So this is also kind of like for myself, since I'm already doing all of this work. I thought, hey, why not just make videos out of it? We're also exactly 8 weeks away from NYSE, after Eternal Weekend, probably the largest stakes, at least in the US, for Vintage. I plan to attend, as do most of the group here in New York. And so I thought this would also be a cool idea for just keeping up with the meta. And if people are willing to come, at least you don't pick up just like from zero. It's probably, if you don't have power, the largest tournament you can attend, or with the highest stakes. And so it's also pretty interesting to do this exercise for those of those that are not as tuned into the meta. And so following something similar to that, I'm gonna represent the decks that won and the decks that were on the top 8 by different cards. Now, it's worth mentioning that this is just an approximation. Obviously, this is not truly representative of the meta, mostly because A, this is only online, but also B, top 8 usually gets a couple people at 4 and 2, and there's a lot of them at 4 and 2. You usually get something between 7 to 8 people at 4 and 2, and only 2 to 3 usually make it to top 8. So there are decks that are going to be here that would be equally represented in the 9th to 16, give or take, bracket. And so just because you make top 8 just means that you could be like one match difference between an opponent of yours doing well or not. But still, I think it's an interesting exercise to just see which decks are doing well and a little bit of like a directionality of where the meta is going that maybe you are not going to get from just the usual metagame screens on MTGO Goldfish, stuff like that. So let's talk a little bit about the decks that won. So first and foremost, this Coveted Jewel deck, which the first time that I looked at it, I thought maybe something was wrong, and I still think it might be something wrong because it had 64 main deck cards and just 11 cards in the sideboard, but still, it won the challenge. Pretty powerful deck, of course, coming in hot as a very big foil for the Loros PO decks that have been floating around for a long time. And in fact, if you take a look at this, and we'll talk about it later, PO is almost basically gone from the top tables. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So second would be the Dredge deck with full creature. So we had seen Mafus Van Gogh, one of the Dredge multi-format experts, playing in Vintage recently and trying to innovate on it. And he was playing, I think it's called Doomscar Titan or something like that, where it's more focused on the bridge from below tokens and trying to make like a much more grindy, while also trying to end the game quickly with the haste and +1/+0 from the reanimation targets. So a little bit different from what we usually see, but this week it's been just stock Dredge as far as we can tell. 3 copies made it to top 8, but one of them made it through entirely. And then for the other 2 challenges, we have 2 different flavors of Loros Frog, one of them just purely blue-black, and the other being the Esper version. And so let's move the champions to their respective arenas, and we see a meta that is relatively dominated by what I like to call just asking questions. There's not that many decks in here that are meant to give answers. We have, I think, 5 copies of Glaring Fleshbreaker, 6 copies of Jewel, and just a solitary Sphere of Resistance or a Sphere Shops deck. 3 Loros Breach decks, and then 2 of each flavor of Blue, Black, and Esper. 4 Initiative decks, which has changed a little bit since the last time we saw Initiative a little bit more represented. They're starting to play Karn in the main deck, mostly to target these shops decks that are a little bit more soft to the null rod effects, although given the current meta, there's most of these decks, if not all of them, pack in anywhere between 2 and 4 again to Masticores and like a very solid creature plan or a very solid disruption plan. I think one of the Fleshbreaker decks had 4 Sphere of the Resistance in the sideboard, so you just fully pivot out of the hard combo into more of a controlling stacksy situation. 3 copies of Dredge, as the Graveyard Hate has kind of like taken a little bit of a dip because of how big of a pressure on the sideboard these decks are putting in. And then we have a singular copy of Oath of Druids. This, I believe, is not a version that was playing Raph and Mikey. It was more of a like Planeswalker control-y version with Renin 6, Narset, Okos, 3 Forbidden Orchards instead, and just 2 Atraxas. So a very, a much more like less into the Atraxa plan and more into the Teamer control-y aspect of the deck. We also had this pretty interesting, just like full Planeswalker control deck in one of the top 8s. This is just basically basically blue-white with a splash on red for just Dag Faden. We're playing 4 Hull Breachers and an Narset as well. 3 Stony Silence in the main deck, and just cards that are very typically controlling from other formats like Wrath of the Skies. So pretty cool addition to see. Very tagged for, again, trying to play against these dual decks, although there is no Karn in that version, which I found a little surprising over this Chase the Mind Sculptor. But they are playing 3 Stony Silence main decks, so still pretty powerful choice. And just to wrap it up, we have the kind of like combo, like full-on combo decks. 2 non-Lurrus Doomsday, so this is the Necro Street Raid Doomsday. A pretty good pick, I would say, for where we are, and we'll take a look at the metagames later. I'm surprised this would have been the deck that I would have played in the Showcase Qualifier if I knew how to play it well. Has a lot of very active, good things going for it. So not only do you have a fast plan with a high kill threat pretty early on in the game, but also a lot of counter magic for all of these sort of like force check decks, but also you are able to play Null Rod, which is not something that most combo decks can afford to do. There was also a sort of like PoE deck, but it's basically just a combo deck with like Yog's Will, Besiege the Mirror, and that sort of stuff. So it was classified as Lurrus PO, but it's definitely just like a Tendrils deck. And then CRK was playing this kind of evolution on a deck that he was playing, or they were playing a couple of weeks ago, with a focus on more of the Thundertrap Trainer and Bowmasters with a Twister and PO package. And now we've moved away from Bowmasters into a deck that packs a lot of different combos. So it's Thundertrap still, but with Fleshrakers, Tezzerets. We also have 4 POs, Tinker for Citadel, Time Vault. And of course, with Fleshraker, we also have Top. So a like jam-packed full of questions. Again, from my perspective, this format is mostly right now about asking questions one after the other. And this version of the deck is just basically putting most of the good combos that you can put into a very solid shell, which is just basically mono blue. It counts as black and Esper because there's like a Sphinx of the Steel Wind in the sideboard and a Velocitail in the main deck, but for all intents and purposes, it's just mono blue. And so this is what our format looks like. So first things first is just talking a little bit about what are we observing. So for me, the top 3 items right now, first, as I've been mentioning, the game looks very much right now about asking questions. All of these decks except for these. So we have from the 32 decks, there's like 9 that are more about presenting answers, sort of. If you think of Breach, like I do, as more of like a control combo deck. But the rest of the decks are just about asking questions, right? Like, can you stop me? Like, how many times can you stop me from going for it? Or do you have an answer to my stacks pieces? Like, you could put Sphere and Initiative kind of in the same bracket because they do have similar plans. or did you like concede too many graveyard hate slots to stop combo, and can I sneak by with Bazaar decks, or how many actual counter spells can you do, or how fast are you at stopping me from killing you immediately with this just full-on combo decks that are not relying on the workshop. The second thing for me is just PO being, and by PO I mean like the Loros PO decks basically being non-existent. At least this week they have been very underrepresented. They haven't had any good showings in the top tables. There's obviously people still playing them, but not really doing that well with them. Of course, there's not that big of a meta spread. We have 4 challenges and there's not that many people playing vintage, but like realistically speaking, we are seeing a massive underrepresentation of Loros PL in the top tables at least, which is not to be surprised. Jewel is a very bad matchup for them. I believe Fleshraker is also not great. And so there was for a while a kind of like cheeky thing about playing 4 commandeers in the sideboard to try and beat the Jewel decks. That I think has mostly been abandoned. I think Miharu was the pioneer for that, and she has dropped them for this week in favor of things like consigned to memory and stuff like that. And so third thing to be thinking about right now is, if you're gonna play next week and you expect something similar to this, you have to be thinking about how do you just survive turn 1, right? So at least in Breach you are seeing that being expressed as playing 2 Mindbreak Traps in the main deck, and all the copies here are playing 3 mana drains instead of the usual 4. So Mindbreak Trap very present, at least in the blue decks. Even this win from Montolio, he recorded it, so I'm also gonna link to his video of the whole challenge. But yeah, they were also mentioning that it was very much about making it through the first turn without being like dead or just overwhelmingly behind. And so Mindbreak that can really help with that. At the same time, that means that most people are expecting it, and so the format is both very much about asking a lot of questions and important ones, but also if you're playing around Mindbreak Trap too much, the format is kind of like slowing, like paradoxically, because Mindbreak Trap is acting as a soft stop pressure for every other deck. Also, because of this particular setup, you could expect a lot more null rod effects as well, which is why Doomsday was also, I think, relatively well positioned for this week. Not only because there was not that much frog, but also because they are, again, a combo deck that can put a lot of pressure early and also develop with null rods on the side. And so finally, I just wanted to go over a little bit of what we can expect in terms of next week's. So I personally think Frog is due for a return. If we look at the most played decks right now, which would be Jewel and Raker, I would say these 2 are right now the decks to beat. From seeing just the spread, you can see here very clearly Doomsday has great win rates against both of them. So again, pretty good choice. However, it has a relatively high learning curve, or apparent learning curve. There's a lot of resources on the Vintage Discord if you want to play this deck that explains a lot of stuff. I think people get very caught up on like the pile that they have to make, and Vintage is probably the easiest place to make piles for Doomsday because of the high power level of the cards. But also if you check here, you see both Frog versions have 60+% win rates against Jewel, and a decent enough, this is basically play draw, but a highly skilled player can definitely make up for these percentages. And so if you expect to have to play against these 2 decks, I would expect, given this new meta, to at least see a resurgence of Frog, which again, we all know that Vintage is relatively cyclical, so if the shop decks are too good or too present and they are pushing out PO, then the Frog decks come to cover, and then once there's too much Frog, then Loros PO can come back and clap them. Also here, Loros Breach is a little less powerful, but still has good matchups against these 2 decks, as well as Loros Doomsday, which is okay. The only problem about Doomsday non-Lotus Doomsday with this meta is that because I would also expect Frog to come back. If we go a little bit back, you see here, Doomsday has an abysmal Frog matchup. And so if you're trying to play Doomsday, but you want to hedge about maybe getting more Frog decks in the next week, then Lotus Doomsday might be where you want to be. It has relatively okay. 49% again is within play draw range, and 59% against Espeluros is actually pretty good. So yeah, this is where I'll leave it. Also to point out, there is, if you want something more analytical on this metagame, Justin Ganari has on his member channel on YouTube an analysis monthly that I also link. Obviously, if you're thinking about playing Vintage Online, you have heard of him already, but I will nevertheless link to that on the description. So yeah, again, just to recap, we are 2 months away from NYSE, and so ideally I'll keep doing this at least until then, every Monday around the same time. And so yeah, let me know if that is interesting to you, any comments, any suggestions. Very open to feedback. We're slowly but surely trying to get more videos going. Both Matt and I are incredibly busy, and due to work, it's been difficult to keep a good schedule, but I think this is enough of a low effort that it is doable for us to at least keep it going until NYSE. So yeah, looking forward to your comments and any suggestions, and thank you so much for watching. See ya.